Imagine waking up in 1929. The stock market has crashed, banks have failed, and 15 million Americans just lost their jobs. That's what kicked off the Great Depression, the longest economic crisis in US history. Putting food on the table meant getting creative, especially at breakfast time. Gone were the days of eggs and bacon. Instead, families transformed simple ingredients like flour and cornmeal into meals that would keep them going until dinner. A cup of coffee with bread dunked in it. That was breakfast for many. But here's the thing, these breakfast recipes weren't just about survival. They taught Americans how to make the most of every ingredient. With grocery prices up 11.4% in just the last year, these Depression-era breakfast tricks could help your family save money too. Hot milk toast. Peaking of smart ways to stretch ingredients. One of the most popular breakfasts during the Depression was hot milk toast. People took their bread, toasted it dark to hide any staleness, then poured hot milk over it. A pinch of salt and a tiny pat of butter made it feel fancy. In 1930, this filling breakfast only cost 2 cents. About 35 cents today. Best part? The hot milk softened even the hardest bread, so nothing went to waste. Every family had their special way of making it. Some added a sprinkle of sugar when they could afford it, while others swore by extra salt. Life-saving tip. The trick was toasting the bread until it got really golden brown. This helped soak up more milk, making the breakfast extra filling. Pretty clever for a meal that used just 3 ingredients, right? Now let's look at another breakfast favorite that kept families going during these tough times. Biscuits and gravy. While milk toast kept bellies warm, another breakfast champion during these hard times was homemade biscuits and gravy. This dish packed more punch than you'd think. Just flour, milk, and a spoonful of saved bacon grease turned into a meal that could feed a whole family. Grandmas knew the secret. Drop biscuits needed no fancy rolling pin or cutting. Just mix flour with a pinch of salt and milk, then drop spoonfuls onto a pan. For gravy, they'd stir flour into that saved bacon grease until it browned, then slowly add milk. The trick? Keep stirring to avoid lumps. Those pennies spent on flour stretched into a breakfast that stuck to your ribs until dinner time. Time to discover another filling morning meal that helped Americans power through these tough years. Depression-era French toast. Back then, regular French toast needed lots of eggs and milk. Too expensive during hard times, so clever cooks mixed 1 egg with water and salt to feed the whole family. Any bread worked here, even the stalest pieces. Just dip, fry in saved cooking grease, and if lucky, top with sugar or molasses. Parents loved saving money. Kids thought they were getting a special treat. Next up, discover how a simple bowl of milk and bread kept American families going through their toughest mornings. Bread and milk. This breakfast became popular in the early 1930s when a quart of milk cost just 14 cents. Break up leftover bread in a bowl, warm up some milk, and pour it over. Simple, but filling. The key was using day-old bread. It soaked up more milk and kept its shape better. Families who could spare a penny or two added a sprinkle of sugar, making this basic breakfast feel special. According to Depression-era cookbook records, this meal cost around 3 cents per bowl. Our next breakfast shows how Americans turned their morning coffee into a complete meal. Toast with sugar cream. A 1930s cookbook shared this treat. Toast topped with a simple mix of milk, sugar, and whatever butter or margarine families could spare. During hard times, many families received surplus dairy through government relief programs. A quart of milk cost 14 cents and butter was 47 cents per pound. During winter months, when fresh food was scarce, this warm, sweet breakfast provided much-needed calories. Children often called it poor man's frosting toast because the sugar cream mixture reminded them of cake frosting. Moving into our next breakfast, we'll see how families turned simple eggs into a meal fit for a king. Creamed eggs on toast. If your family had a backyard chicken in 1933, eggs cost about 35 cents per dozen. Those precious eggs became the star of this resourceful breakfast. Families would hard-boil the eggs, chop them up, and fold them into a simple white sauce made from flour, milk, and saved butter or cooking grease. The Farm Security Administration records show this dish gained popularity when government programs started distributing eggs and dairy to struggling families. What made it special was how 1 or 2 eggs could feed 4 people when mixed into the creamy sauce and served over toast. Some families added a dash of pepper or dried herbs from their victory gardens to make it more flavorful. During the coldest months, this hot, protein-rich breakfast helped parents ensure their children got enough nutrition to stay healthy. Records from community cookbooks of the era show variations using dried beef when available, though this was usually saved for special occasions. Ready to discover how Depression-era cooks turned simple, scrambled eggs into a hearty gravy that could feed twice as many mouths? Egg gravy. In 1933, when a dozen eggs cost 35 cents, resourceful home cooks discovered they could stretch eggs even further than traditional scrambling. Historical records from Midwest farm communities show how this gravy became a Depression-era staple, combining eggs with basic flour gravy. The technique spread through community cookbooks and word of mouth. Start with a basic white sauce using flour, saved cooking fat, and milk or water. Then, drop beaten eggs directly into the simmering gravy, creating golden streaks throughout. According to homemaker guides from the period, this method could turn 2 eggs into a filling breakfast for 6 people. Farm Security Administration documents reveal that egg gravy gained particular popularity in rural areas where families kept chickens but needed to sell most of their eggs for income. The protein-rich gravy, served over homemade biscuits or toast, provided sustained energy for morning farm work. Speaking of stretching eggs to their limit, wait until you hear about the clever water trick that helped families double their scrambled egg portions. Water-stretched scrambled eggs. During the toughest years of the Depression, families discovered that beating a small amount of water into eggs before scrambling created a larger portion without changing the taste. Government pamphlets from 1932 recommended this technique to help stretch food budgets when eggs cost around 35 cents per dozen. The U.S. Department of Agriculture archives reveal this method became widespread through home demonstration agents who taught women across America how to extend their food supplies. The key was adding just the right amount of water, about 1 tablespoon per egg, and beating vigorously to incorporate air. This created fluffy scrambled eggs that looked and felt like they came from twice as many eggs. Home economists of the era noted that salting the eggs after cooking, rather than before, helped maintain the proper texture. Some families lucky enough to have access to fresh herbs would add chopped wild onions or dandelion greens for extra flavor without extra cost. Moving from eggs to grains, our next breakfast shows how simple cornmeal transformed into a morning meal that could last for days. Cornmeal mush. One of the most economical breakfast staples during the Great Depression emerged from a single 5-pound bag of cornmeal, which cost just 10 cents in 1932. According to USDA historical records, cornmeal provided essential calories at just pennies per serving. Farm journals from the era document the precise technique, slowly stirring cornmeal into boiling water, cooking until thick, then serving hot with a splash of milk, if available. What made this breakfast particularly valuable was its versatility. Families would pour leftover mush into bread pans to cool overnight. The U.S. National Archives preserve accounts from rural communities where this breakfast sustained farm workers through long mornings. Home economists of the period calculated that 1 cup of cornmeal could produce enough mush to feed a family of 4, making it one of the most cost-effective options available. Preparing us for our next economical breakfast solution, let's explore how families turned simple rice into a warming morning treat that felt more like dessert. Rice pudding breakfast. During the height of the Depression in 1933, rice became a breakfast game-changer, costing only 8 cents per pound. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration promoted rice as an affordable grain that could be transformed into a filling morning meal. Historical cookbooks from the era show how mothers would simmer rice slowly in milk or water for families who couldn't afford milk, adding a sprinkle of sugar if available. The long, slow cooking process broke down the rice, creating a creamy texture even without much milk. Government home economists taught women to add a pinch of salt to enhance the natural sweetness. What set this breakfast apart was its ability to feel special despite its simplicity. Relief Workers reports from 1934 mention children looking forward to rice pudding mornings, especially when dried fruit found its way into the pot. 1 pound of rice could provide breakfast for a family of 6 for 2 full days. As we turn to our next breakfast solution, imagine how families transformed simple oats into a hearty meal using an ingredient that was cheaper than sugar: rolled oats with milk. In 1932, when a large container of rolled oats cost just 8 cents, this breakfast became essential for American families. The Federal Surplus Relief Corporation distributed oats through food assistance programs, making them widely accessible even to the poorest households. Home demonstration agents taught families a crucial money-saving technique. Soaking oats overnight in water reduced cooking time and fuel costs. According to preserved Extension Service records, families often sweetened their oats with molasses instead of sugar. Molasses provided iron and calcium while costing half as much as sugar. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's archived nutrition guides from 1933 reveal that 1 cup of dry oats could produce enough breakfast to feed a family of 4. Extension workers documented how mothers would often thin the oatmeal with extra water but cook it longer, creating a creamy texture that helped children feel satisfied until lunchtime. Moving from oats to wheat, our next breakfast shows how Americans discovered comfort in a simple bowl of warm wheat cereal: cream of wheat. In 1931, cream of wheat emerged as a vital breakfast staple, with a 28-ounce box costing just 15 cents. The National Archives preserve records showing this wheat farina cereal's distribution through government relief programs, providing essential nutrients to struggling families. According to U.S. Department of Agriculture documentation, families learned to stretch a single serving by adding extra water and cooking it longer, creating a smooth, creamy texture. Home economists of the era noted that the slow cooking method actually improved the cereal's digestibility, making it particularly suitable for young children and elderly family members. Relief Worker reports from 1933 detail how mothers often served this hot cereal with a small pat of butter when available, or a sprinkle of cinnamon to make it feel special. 1 box could provide breakfast for a family of 5 for nearly a week, making it one of the most economical options during the hardest years. Transitioning from hot cereals to creative alternatives, our next recipe shows how families turned basic pantry items into pancakes without using precious eggs or milk. Depression-era pancakes. The 1932 USDA Home Economics Bureau documented one of the most resourceful breakfast innovations: eggless pancakes. When eggs reached 35 cents a dozen, families discovered they could create tender pancakes using just flour, water, and a small amount of fat, typically saved bacon grease or lard. Government food guides from 1933 show how home economists taught this money-saving technique across America. Mix flour with water until smooth, add a pinch of salt, and cook on a hot griddle. The secret to tenderness came from letting the batter rest for 10 minutes before cooking. For sweetness, families used corn syrup, which cost just 12 cents per pint and was often available through relief programs. Michigan State University's archives preserve Depression-era records showing that 1 cup of flour could make enough pancakes to feed a family of 4. What made these pancakes particularly valuable was their ability to fill hungry stomachs using ingredients that were almost always on hand. Speaking of creative solutions, our next breakfast reveals how Americans turned humble potatoes into crispy morning treats: potato pancakes. Farm Security Administration records from 1932 show how potatoes, at just a penny each, became breakfast heroes during the Depression. When flour was scarce, creative cooks turned to grated potatoes as the base for crispy morning pancakes. Historical recipe collections from Midwestern communities reveal the simple yet effective technique. Grate potatoes fine, squeeze out extra moisture, and mix with just a sprinkle of flour and a small amount of egg, if available. The real secret, documented in home extension guides, was using saved bacon grease for frying. It added crucial flavor and helped create a golden brown crust. Department of Agriculture reports from 1933 note that 3 medium potatoes could make enough pancakes to feed a family of 4. Extension agents taught that adding grated onion, when available from home gardens, helped stretch the potatoes even further while adding extra flavor. Now, imagine turning simple cornmeal into a breakfast that rivals modern hash browns. Corncakes. 1933, Agricultural Extension Service records reveal how corncakes became a Depression-era breakfast sensation. With cornmeal priced at just 3 cents per pound, families discovered they could create filling breakfast patties using minimal ingredients. The USDA's home demonstration records detail the basic recipe that spread across America. Mix cornmeal with hot water until thick, season with salt, and form into small cakes. Home economists taught women to cook these in saved cooking fats until crispy on both sides. Historical accounts from rural communities show that bacon grease was particularly prized for this purpose, as it added both flavor and staying power to the morning meal. Farm Bureau documents from 1934 note that 1 cup of cornmeal could produce enough corncakes to feed a family of 5. What made these especially valuable was their ability to keep children satisfied through a morning of farm chores or school. Moving from cornmeal to fruit, our next breakfast shows how families turned dried apples into a special morning treat. Apple hand pies. Food preservation records from 1932 show dried apples became a breakfast treasure, costing just 15 cents per pound. The National Archives preserve accounts of families creating these portable morning pies as a way to make breakfast feel special during hard times. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's home demonstration guides taught women to rehydrate dried apples overnight, then wrap them in a simple crust made from flour, saved fat, and water. These pies, according to Extension Service reports, could be baked in the evening and eaten cold the next morning, saving precious fuel. Historical records note that working family members often carried these pies in their pockets for a mid-morning meal. Relief worker documents from 1933 reveal that 1 pound of dried apples could produce enough small pies to provide breakfast for a family of 6 for 2 days. The simple dough recipe used just 3 ingredients, making it accessible even to the poorest households. As we continue our journey through Depression-era breakfasts, discover how yesterday's cornmeal mush transformed into today's crispy morning delight. Fried cornmeal mush. In 1932, a brilliant breakfast strategy emerged from Depression-era kitchens, transforming leftover cornmeal mush into a crispy morning feast. Historical cookbooks from the Midwest archives show this technique helped families avoid food waste while creating what many considered a special breakfast. USDA home demonstration records detail the process that spread across America. Leftover cornmeal mush was poured into loaf pans, left to set overnight, then sliced and fried until golden brown. Extension Service documents from 1933 note that families used saved bacon grease or lard for frying, which added crucial flavor and calories. The traditional topping was molasses, available for just 10 cents a quart through government surplus programs. Farm Security Administration photographs and reports capture how this breakfast became particularly popular in rural communities. One batch of cornmeal mush could provide 2 distinct breakfasts, hot cereal one day and these crispy slices the next. Now let's explore how Americans turned their morning coffee into a complete breakfast using just a few simple ingredients. coffee soup. Historical records from 1931 reveal how Americans transformed stale bread and coffee into a filling breakfast called coffee soup. With coffee prices at 21 cents per pound and day-old bread often given away by bakeries, this meal emerged as a practical morning solution. The New York Public Library's menu collection and Depression-era cookbooks document the simple preparation. Pour hot coffee over bread chunks in a bowl, add a splash of milk if available, and sweeten with a sprinkle of sugar. Relief Worker reports from 1933 note that working men particularly favored this breakfast for its combination of calories and caffeine, essential for long days of manual labor. The Federal Writers Project interviews from the era capture how neighborhood coffee shops would often give away yesterday's coffee grounds, allowing families to stretch their coffee budget by reusing grounds once or twice. This breakfast, according to USDA records, could feed a family of 4 for just pennies. Moving from coffee to foraged ingredients, our next breakfast reveals how Americans found a free coffee substitute right in their own backyards. Dandelion tea. In 1932, as coffee prices strained family budgets, the USDA Home Extension Service taught Americans about a free coffee alternative growing in their yards. Dandelions. Extension records show agents demonstrating how to dig up dandelion roots, clean them thoroughly, then roast and grind them into a coffee-like beverage. Historical accounts from the Farm Security Administration document this practice, spreading rapidly through communities. The roots were typically harvested in fall when they contained the most nutrients. Home economists' guides from 1933 detail the preparation. Roots were chopped, dried in the sun, then roasted until dark brown. This created a hot, caffeine-free drink that, while different from coffee, provided warmth and comfort at no cost. Agricultural bulletins from the period note that dandelion root tea offered unexpected health benefits, containing vitamins and minerals that many Depression-era diets lacked. Extension workers reported that some families preferred it to regular coffee even after their financial situations improved. Just as families found creative ways to replace coffee, they also discovered how to make an affordable version of another breakfast favorite, hot chocolate. Depression-era hot chocolate. The 1933 Bureau of Home Economics records reveal how families created an affordable version of hot chocolate during the hardest years. When cocoa powder cost 15 cents per half-pound tin, mothers learned to stretch it by using just a teaspoon per cup of hot water. Government relief programs occasionally distributed cocoa powder, recognizing its importance in making children's breakfasts feel special. Home demonstration records from the Department of Agriculture detail the careful preparation method. Mix cocoa powder with a small amount of cold water to prevent lumps, then slowly add hot water while stirring. Sugar was used sparingly, often just a pinch per cup. Extension service documents show that families who received powdered milk through aid programs would add a spoonful to make the drink more nourishing. Historical accounts from school teachers of the era note that children with this warm breakfast drink showed better attention in morning classes. 1 half-pound tin of cocoa could provide a month of Sunday morning treats for an average family. Moving to our next breakfast innovation, discover how Americans turned plain toast into a sweet morning treat using just 2 common ingredients. Cinnamon sugar toast. During the harsh winter of 1932, when butter cost 47 cents per pound, families discovered a simple way to create a breakfast treat that felt special. Federal relief organizations documented this recipe, spreading through communities as an affordable alternative to store-bought pastries. Home economists' records from 1933 detail how mothers would save the ends of bread loaves specifically for this purpose. The secret was in the preparation. Toast the bread until very crisp, then brush with whatever fat was available, often saved bacon grease or rendered lard. The topping consisted of a carefully mixed blend of sugar and cinnamon, with records showing that 1 cup of sugar, priced at 5 cents, mixed with cinnamon, could last a family 2 weeks of Sunday breakfasts. USDA nutrition guides from the era noted that this breakfast, while simple, provided quick energy for children heading to school. Extension Service reports reveal that some families would save this special breakfast for Sunday mornings, making it feel like a weekend treat despite its humble ingredients. As we explore our next breakfast, we'll discover how families turned their once-a-week baking into a special morning celebration. Sunday morning griddle cakes. Extension Service records from 1932 reveal how families turned Sunday breakfast into a weekly celebration with special griddle cakes. On a teacher's salary of $70 per month, saving 1 egg and a cup of milk for Sunday pancakes was a careful weekly budget decision. The USDA's home demonstration guides show the resourceful recipe. Mix flour with a single beaten egg, diluted milk, and a pinch of saved bacon grease. Home economists taught mothers to let the batter rest before cooking, which improved texture without adding cost. Relief program documents note that baking powder, at 23 cents per can, was often reserved specifically for these special pancakes. Farm Bureau reports mention families often topped these with homemade fruit preserves or simple sugar syrup, turning basic ingredients into what felt like a restaurant treat. 1 cup of flour could make enough griddle cakes for a family of 6. Speaking of Sunday specials, our next recipe shows how families turned fall apples into a spread that lasted all winter. Apple butter toast. Farm Security Administration photos from 1933 document how families turned fall apples into a year-round breakfast spread. Historical records show apples cost just 1 cent each when bought from local orchards. Home extension guides detail the process. Cook apples slowly with minimal sugar until thick and dark brown. This concentrated the natural sweetness, requiring less precious sugar. County Fair records from 1934 reveal that many families competed for ribbons with their apple butter recipes, often adding a pinch of cinnamon or cloves when available. 1 bushel of apples could produce enough apple butter to last through winter, costing about 50 cents total for a season's worth of breakfast spread. Corn pone, USDA archives from 1932 show corn pone becoming a vital breakfast, especially in southern states. Made from cornmeal, 3 cents per pound, water, and a pinch of salt, this dense bread was cooked in cast iron skillets, often passed down through generations. Extension Service documents detail how families would make a week's worth at once, using just 1 cup of cornmeal for 6 servings. The key technique, preserved in agricultural bulletins, was preheating the skillet with saved bacon grease, creating a crispy crust that kept the bread fresh longer. Get ready to discover our final Depression-era breakfast, where simple milk toast got a special upgrade that turned it into a weekend treat. Milk toast with raisins. Depression-era records from 1933 show how families transformed basic milk toast into a fancy breakfast by adding raisins. When raisins cost 10 cents per pound through government surplus programs, mothers would save a handful for weekend breakfasts, making ordinary milk toast feel like a special occasion. The USDA's home demonstration reports reveal the careful preparation. Families would soak a few raisins overnight in water, then add them to the hot milk before pouring over toast. Extension Service documents note that this method made the raisins plump and stretches their sweetness throughout the milk. The liquid from soaking raisins added extra flavor without using precious sugar. Home economist guides from 1934 show that just 2 tablespoons of raisins could transform breakfast for a family of 4. Relief worker accounts mention children calling this birthday toast because it was often saved for special occasions. As we wrap up our journey through these resourceful Depression-era breakfasts, let's look at how these money-saving methods can help your family today. These Depression-era breakfast recipes did more than just fill empty stomachs. According to Federal Relief Administration records from 1934, families who adopted these cooking methods reduced their food expenses by up to 30%. Today, with grocery prices up 11.4% from last year, these same money-saving techniques are gaining new relevance. Thanks for joining this journey through America's resourceful breakfast history. Hit like if you learned something new and subscribe for more money-saving recipes from the past. Remember, sometimes the best solutions come from the hardest times,